So welcome everyone. This is our August meeting for Women IT Pros on the fourth Friday. It's our US call, but everyone is welcome. And it is Good Advocates and Allies of Women in Tech with Eva Helen. And just very, very excited about this. This is a topic that we definitely want to look at more. And let's see, it doesn't seem to be moving in the window here. So let me figure that out. There we go. So in the chat window, please take some time and tell us a little bit about yourself, as much as you're willing to share what kind of work you do. You don't have to be a woman or an IT pro to be here. We welcome everyone. And if you'd like to include your social media so that we can follow each other, find each other, general area that you live in, and any conferences or groups you may be going to, even though right now I know they are all virtual, all digital, but even that's pretty cool to be able to meet up with people. And so I've thrown mine in the chat window there if you want to scroll up. And of course, the big thing that is coming up is Microsoft Ignite 2020, all digital. So just go out there and search for Microsoft Ignite. Right now, we're still in the sign up to get more information phase of things, but sign up there. And then as soon as we've opened the registration and the schedule building, you'll be able to jump in there and pick out the events you want. And especially keep a watch out for anything that's hashtag WomenITPros. You can follow that on Twitter or go to the tech community, because that's going to be the fun stuff that Shauna Bang puts together. And she always does amazing things. So, so we'll have some sessions going on for that. And also, we'll be doing our Women IT Pros September meeting. Will be happening in the Friday right after that Ignite. So we'll be looking forward to getting a bunch of people together for that. And while we're in the call here, feel free to come off mute if you can. At various times, we may stop and say, hey, give us your feedback. Other times, put your chat in the chat window. We also have a LinkedIn group for Women IT Pros that you can join, and we welcome you to share your information there. And let's see, I just want to make sure, is my screen showing upcoming Women IT Pros calls? Is that what everyone is? Okay, good. So September 9th is going to be the next European call. The date and topic will be announced on Twitter, so follow that. And then our next US event will be on September 11th from 3:30 to 5 p.m. We're doing our meetups in AltSpace VR, but you don't need a VR headset, just a 2D app. And so watch for that. It'll be on, I think it's already in Eventbrite. And then, our September 25th call right after Ignite is going to be about vulnerability, the underbelly of anger and fear, with Sheila Junka. I'm really looking forward to that one. If you've seen any of Brené's Brown work on vulnerability, you know how really critical that is right now for a conversation. And then the Asia Pacific call should be September 30th at 7. So watch for all of those. You're welcome at any of them. And in the meantime, if you're looking to connect with other people, get the Community Mentors mobile app. It's awesome. We had the founder on our last call, and the recording of that's available on YouTube. And on there, you can find ways to create a textable tribe of people that you can stay in touch with in the technology world. And you can find mentors. And there are also 2 network communities up there, one about mental health, and the other one is about security. So really interesting things happening there. And at the end, of course, we'd love for you to take a survey. I'll put that link in the chat window so that we can get it later. And just our standard disclaimer, this is an open source grassroots activity. So I'm on here just as myself, trying to bring together more women in tech. We invite our speakers here to present their opinions based on their experience. We're not speaking on behalf of Microsoft or any other organization. So with that, I'd like to introduce Eva Helen, founder and CEO of EQ Inspiration and director of the board at Printer Logic. And what really attracted me, I think it was actually one of my MVPs who introduced me to Eva, and I was just so excited to have this conversation because really, the conversation about allyship and advocacy. It's not just about women talking to women, it's about women also talking to men. So I noticed we had a couple men join us today. We're really thrilled that you're here. If you know anyone else, you want to jump on the line and say, hey, come on, we're just getting started. And with that, Eva, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let me just check real quick and see if I can see your slide here, and I'm not seeing it come in. I don't know if you want to try sending it one more time.
Yeah. It's let me see. It's actually shared through Google. Does that maybe not work?
It should. I don't think we blocked that.
No, right? It is.
Yeah.
It is shared with you. Can
you send it as an email attachment?
That's really odd, isn't it? It's kind of big.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's, I mean, it's just a lot of images. Is there a different email address that I can use for you to send it to you?
Just with the way my other email, it is going to take me longer probably to get it that way.
Restricted, only people added can open the link. Huh, I'm going to try one more thing here.
Fun with technology. The thing I say about technology is it's very efficient. You can get twice as frustrated in half the time.
Well, I just, these are kind of, you know, this has never happened to me before kind of thing.
Yeah, I know.
As we all say in tech, right? So I'm sending you the link now again. And let's see if you can open it that way, because it is shared with you. In the meantime, you know, maybe I'll just start introducing myself so that we don't waste too much time.
Slide up here. Yeah.
So we don't have to switch to another program. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm very honored to be talking about this topic. A little bit about myself. So I'm originally from Sweden, came over half a lifetime ago. So 25 years ago, I came over from Stockholm to Silicon Valley, and I found my first job in the tech industry, which was quite exciting. I didn't even know what tech was back then, but I found myself selling hardware. One thing led to the next, and then after that, I was part of starting up and running and actually exiting two software companies, one in 1999 and one in 2015. And then I retired, or I tried, and it didn't work very well. So as we had been moved back, our company was acquired by Citrix, and we had moved back because I was on the East Coast, moved back to Silicon Valley. I started networking and running around, and this is obviously, you know, a few years ago. So we were able to meet people in person. And I went to a lot of networking events, just like this one, but in person, and met tons of amazing women. I really wanted to just kind of seed everywhere and see what would pop out of this. I got a lot of speaking engagement talking about my journey as a woman entrepreneur in the tech space. And then after a while, I was like, this is really great. But I was also going to events where the focus was talking about, like, how do we advance more women? How do we get more women into leadership positions? And I found that there's definitely a place and a space where women need to meet and talk about these topics on their own. But there's also a place for men to be invited to that conversation. So I went to a few of the men that I met at these events, or that I met or that I knew outside from before. And I said, if I organize something called Women in Tech, an event for guys, will you come? And they said, absolutely, we would love to attend. So said and done, just around the time when the Me Too movement kind of got this restart, it was just a coincidence that it happened right then. I actually organized a series of events called EQ Inspiration, and they were targeted towards men. The way that I would get men there was to say to the women, you know, please come and then bring a man along. And the things that we would do during these events is obviously tons of networking time, but we would talk about something that was not directly related to diversity or inclusion or equality, but had something to do with something like vulnerability or the way the brain works, or kind of a soft topic that everybody could relate to. And then I would interview men on stage. And this was obviously set up in advance. So I would have a few men that I had prepped in advance on a panel. And I would ask them things like, okay, how are you dealing with women in the workplace? Do you have any experience with supporting one, or mentoring somebody, or sponsoring somebody? And all of these amazing stories started coming out. And I was like, this is great. I need to find more of these stories, and I want to share them with a broader audience. How do I do that? So the winter before last, I set out to do a series of interviews. So I interviewed 60 men, hour-long interviews, all people so they were from CEOs to individual contributors. They were from, some were on the older side going towards retirement, but then as young as 25, 30. And it was, oh, perfect, Kathy. Thank you. And so I got like this broad spectrum. It turned out, because it's the tech industry, almost 50, I want to say like 45% of them were actually men that had come, they were first generation Americans. So a lot of different backgrounds, but most of them work in Silicon Valley. All of them work in tech in one function or another. And it could be engineers, or it could be business people, or salespeople, or marketing, whatever. And so then I had tons of material, and I've never done this before. I mean, I used to run software companies, so I didn't really know what to do with all this massive amounts of transcribed material. But, I started going through it, and I was looking for patterns. And as it were, I was able to withdraw enough information from this interview to create 7 characters of men who are supporting women. And so what I want to say here is that, we hear a lot of negative talk about what people are not doing, and how guys are not helping, and how difficult it is for women. And yes, we need to have our facts straight, and we need to have that conversation, absolutely. But it doesn't hurt to shine a light on the goodness that's going on out there. Because if we do, then more men can say, oh, he's doing that. That doesn't seem so difficult. I can do that too. The other thing that I'd heard from a lot of the men that I talked to throughout this whole thing was, when they come in and they talk about unconscious bias, or they do workshops, it's sort of like they're giving and delivering the same message to everybody. A white man who I know was in one of these workshop sessions, and he said, well, the presenter, she was fantastic, and she was great, and she was talking about, white men, and not just as men, but also as white, and she's delivering this amazing message, and everybody's listening. But he had looked around the room, and he was actually the only white person in the room. And that's because it's the tech industry. So we get a lot of mixed race, not very many women in the room. But so delivering the same message to everybody doesn't always work. So what I wanted to do with this was, by creating these different characters that are men at different levels, both of internal and external awareness around equality, but primarily they have different willingness, and they're taking different action to support women's advancement and support equality. And depending on what level they're at, I have no right to judge them. You have no right to judge them. They are where they are, and they start where they start. But let's not try to make everybody excited about becoming a sponsor or leading cultural change. Let's instead show them that they can do just a little bit more. And if everybody were to do a little bit more, we would then have a bigger movement of support for the women who are trying to make progress. So please move to the next slide, Kathy. Let's see. I'm going to introduce you to my friends, the characters on the Matrix. I'm going to tell you their names and what they are doing. And we're going to talk a little bit about specific things that came out of the interviews that I was doing, of examples that they're doing. This material is all going to be published in a nice short book. It's going through the second round of editing right now. I didn't realize it takes so long to get a book published, but it's on the way. And in the meantime, we can use the material as much as we want to. It's there and it's available to everybody. Next slide. So the first group of allies, or advocates rather, are Marc, James, and Samir. So I've divided these 7 characters up into 3 groups: the advocates, the allies, and the chauvinist. The advocates are at the top of the matrix, if you will. They're the ones that are the most aware around about equality or inequality issues. They are doing things for more than one woman at a time, and they're also not hesitating at all to support them, and all of their actions are visible. So Marc is a specialist. He is you'll see him in HR role, or you'll see him as an external consultant. Maybe he comes in and starts a corporate-wide initiative. Maybe he starts ERG groups. Maybe if he's an outside consultant, comes in and works with HR. Preferably, he works very closely with the CEO and the executive leadership team, so that he has he sort of gives a voice to everybody else. The other thing that Marc does is he talks directly to other men, and that makes him different from all the other characters. He doesn't hesitate to address men directly in a broader setting, not just one-on-one, but actually talk directly to men's groups. Maybe he's also like an initiative taker of men's groups. There's an organization in New York called Men Advocating for Real Change. That's where Marc got his name from. There's a conference here on the West Coast called the Better Man Conference. There's all kinds of initiatives for men who actually are willing and ready to talk to other guys about how we can support women and minorities. James is the change agent. He is the leader of the organization or leader of a team, and you will see him around you. He builds teams of 50-50 men and women. He will include everybody in his leadership. He's typically very compassionate, and he will drive culture change. So from his level and down, and he won't hesitate to make what he's doing visible, but very often his head is down and he's just kind of doing it. And as you'll see later on, the next step for him to become a Marc is actually to make his work visible, to talk about how successful his team of a 50-50 men and women split is working. Samir is the next person on the matrix, and Samir is our sponsor. So Samir will sponsor women that he identifies have potential. He will step in and say, maybe it's somebody he has worked with before, maybe it's somebody he has mentored before, or he has done a project with before, but he'll put his own name on the line to make sure that woman gets hired or promoted or stays active in her role. Samir is also incredibly empathetic, and very often he has a background where he's experienced being an outsider, perhaps in childhood, perhaps earlier on. So it's easier for him to relate to groups, minority groups, and with women. Next slide, please. The next group that we have are the allies, and the allies are Memo, Al, and Connor. And the main difference between the advocates and the allies is that the advocates, like I said, they usually direct their actions to a broader group, and they don't hesitate at all when it comes to showing their work. The allies are there, and they're everywhere among us. And so the idea here is we need to identify them. We have to figure out who they are so that we can kind of usher them along or encourage them or invite them to help a little bit more. The top person among the allies is Memo. He's the mentor, and mentorship is really interesting. I've done mentoring events, invited multiple men to support lots of young people that needed immediate mentorship. I've done a lot of things around mentoring, and what I'm realizing, and this is what sort of symbolizes Memo is that maybe sometimes he's a little hesitant to mentoring if there isn't a formal program. And that's unfortunate because he has so much to give. He has so much experience in his subject matter or just life experience in the workplace and so on. And he has a lot to share, but sometimes he hesitates. So I encourage everybody to go and find an official mentoring program. And if there isn't one in your organization, go and ask if they can set one up. And if they still don't want to do that, or if it doesn't happen, go outside. There's tons of virtual and online mentoring programs that you can sign up for. You can email me afterwards and I'll tell you about some opportunities that are available. I try to always have a couple of young women that I'm mentoring because mentors are always needed. The next person is Al. Al is our happy-go-lucky guy who says, I love to work with women. Fantastic. Just tell me how I can support them. I'm not entirely sure what to do. And he is everywhere. You'll see him around you in the workplace, I'm sure. The one thing there is he doesn't yet connect the dots between innovation, like diversity and innovation. And there's been tons of studies here. I actually have some data. The Boston Consulting Group conducted a study in 2017 of 1,700 companies. And they were actually showing that innovation revenue increased by 19 percentage points from 26 to 45% of the total revenue in companies with above average diversity on their management teams. I think that's interesting. And that's one of those facts that we need to deliver to Connor, who comes next, and also our next character. But collecting data like that and making it available is sometimes really important. And so where Al knows that he needs to support women around him, and he probably already does in one way or another. I'll get into more details of that. But serving him with information like statistics is very, very helpful. Connor is, so you'll know the guy. He's pretty happy in his job, and he sits in the office, and then you're in the lunchroom or you're having a conversation virtually as it is right now, and the topic of gender equality comes up or any kind of discussion related to that topic, and he becomes quiet. If you're in the office, he walks away, he goes back to his desk. He doesn't want to have that discussion. However, that doesn't mean that he doesn't support women. When I interviewed the Connors, what they would tell me is that they support somebody in their family, they support their wife or their partner, maybe their daughter. And as it turns out, they also support a woman that's close to them on their team without even reflecting over it. And when somebody moves from Connor to Al, very much of that stage, it's really about like noticing that you're making a difference, but not being aware of the difference that you're making in somebody's life. Let's move to the next slide, please. The next character is Richard. And I call him the chauvinist. I want to be very, very careful and precise here. So Richard, he's everywhere among us. He's opposed to change. He's concerned that women are going to take over the workplace. He thinks that women should be more aggressive or they should be more like men. That doesn't mean that he doesn't disrespect all women. If he works with a woman and he respects her and finds her intelligent and they speak the same language, he has no problem working with her. But he really doesn't think that women need help at all. And the last thing that we want to do here, just like with all the other characters, we don't want to judge. We don't want to judge him for being who he is. However, there are ways to open his mind so that maybe he will start thinking about other things than what he's been thinking about to date. The sad thing in some of the stories of the Richards that I talked to was when they talk to other women who they can't relate to quite as easily, is that they perhaps sometimes become disrespectful, but that doesn't mean that we need to be respectful in return. Let's just show the good way. So the next slide, please. Now that we know and you have a very quick overview of who the different characters are. So we had Marc, James, and Samir, who are the advocates, Memo, Al, and Connor, who are our allies, and Richard. That's great. So maybe a couple of the guys on the call are thinking, yeah, I'm not really this person, but I'm probably a combination of. Perfectly fine. And maybe if you're a woman on the call, you're thinking, yeah, I've worked with this guy, or I've been supported by a Samir, or my manager or my peer is a James. So there is going to be some thoughts that are going on. And like I said, this is very high level, and you'll be able to get more detailed information from me if you email me, and I'm going to make the material available also through the book. I think that the next slide is going to show you a bell curve, and I want to show that because it, so you want to switch slides, Kathy? Oh no, it's down at the bottom. Okay, that's okay. We'll get to it in a little bit. But basically, I want to show the spread of numbers of people from my interviews who I find at whichever state. So there's not as many Richards and there's not as many Marcs in my material as there are Connors and Als. So we'll get to that. So now that you know who the characters are, well, that's great, but what are you going to do about it? And so in the book, you'll be able to, once you've identified with a character, or you as a woman are saying, well, this is the guy that I'm working with, then you can go to the section about how that person moves from one level to the next. So if you're a Richard and you aspire to do just a little bit more to become a Connor, what are the things that you can do? And I'm not making suggestions out of the blue as just saying you should be doing this, you should be doing that. What I did is I, listened to what Connor is already doing. And then I'm just saying, Richard, if you just do what Connor in these stories is already doing, you will have moved the needle just a little bit. So as we know, Richard is supposed to change and he lacks motivation to support women. He may be motivated by the facts. Like I said, if he doesn't know the statistics, many of them say, well, we have a pipeline problem, for example. Well, I'm going to tell you that 53% of all graduate students right now are women. So that's a little bit lame. And as we know, and what Kathy and I were talking about previously, it's like, what does a woman in tech? Who is it that this guy is trying to support anyway? And as we know, women in tech are not just coders. They're not just the developers of the technology. They're not just the ones that are sitting, behind their screens all day. Women in tech, they're all like everybody like us. People who've been selling technology for a long time, consumers of technology. Maybe we're working in the tech department of a company that's just using it. There's so many different roles and it's so broad, everything from marketing or working in HR to tech company, that encompasses all women in tech. So when it comes to, I want to give you an example. So I'm going to give you one example for each one of these, just in the sake of time. And I really would like to get to questions towards the end. So just keep shooting your questions in. I know Kathy will be looking at them and then we'll walk through them later, or unmute yourself if you want to stop me as well. I know I talk fast. So Richard to Connor, as you know, Richard doesn't really want to support a woman, but in a scenario where he can join others to do so, he may not be uncomfortable. In this particular example, I talked to a man where the whole team defended a woman in front of their CEO. So it was the team and then the team leader and then the CEO. And the CEO had said, well, when this woman now goes on maternity leave, I'm going to divvy up her accounts and give them to the junior sellers. And that's going to be that. And she will not get her commission or her bonus or whatever when she's out. And these senior sellers got very upset about the whole thing. And with the help of their team leader, they were actually able to sort of defend her. So when she came back, there had never been a split of the accounts. She was able to keep all the accounts that she had before that. And, it may not seem like a very big deal, but it was. I mean, she kept her job, she kept her status. It's not like anybody could benefit financially from the fact that she was out on maternity leave. And the only reason that Richard was able to do that is because he had the support of his teammates. So he never had to make himself visible in that supporting role because he was just part of a group. And I think that's a really good starting point. Next slide, please. So the next character is Connor to Al. And as you know, Connor is reserved and minds his own. What I mean by that is he's the one who closes the door when he's not comfortable with a conversation. He definitely takes care of his family, and he takes care of maybe a woman that works closely to him, and takes care. By that I mean includes her, says, hey, it's us, it's we are a team, and so on. But when it comes to Connor moving to Al, like I said before, he starts to notice what's going on, and he's also working on his own confidence in these situations. So in the first event that I'm talking about here, there was, the guy was out at a customer site. They were at a bank customer site. So it was him and a woman from the vendor company, and they went out to the customer site. And they were going to spend, they were basically working as consultants during the whole deployment of the solution. So they were there for months. And the relatively conservative bank customer said, that's fine. We're going to work with both of you. But as it were, they always kept coming back to him with the questions. They didn't go to her. And he said, well, this is her area of expertise. This is my area of expertise. All these questions need to go to her. And he kept pushing back and pushing back and pushing back. And eventually they started going to her, but it took a long time. Now, as women on the call, we know that this happens all the time, and it's not that strange. What's interesting, though, is that this guy, who was Connor and became Al through this, is that he noticed that he was surprised by their behavior, but she was not surprised by their behavior. So it's all a question of like taking a step back and recognizing, whoa, there's something wrong with the situation. How can I change it? And he did do a great job. He pushed and pushed and pushed back. And eventually she was able to have a direct relationship with the customer and the people at the customer site. The other example, and I do have two examples here because Connor to Al is such an important place. I think for a lot of us who work with engineers, and of course they're not all like that. And when you don't have more, the generalizations in this are pretty broad, and that's okay. But this is a starting point to a discussion and a language that we haven't had before. But when Connor wants to become Al, one thing he can do is in his own meetings. And this is really tricky. Now we have all virtual meetings. We don't see each other in person as much. Is making room for everybody to speak. So when we're sitting, this example here is a man who was a team leader. He had weekly meetings, and he noticed that Bob was speaking 90% of the time. He took up all the space in the meeting, and he felt that it was a little bit frustrating. So what he would actually do is not just direct his next question to the woman in the room or to somebody else who wasn't speaking, but he would actually physically turn his body towards that person who he wanted to hear from. And that's a very subtle thing. And then he would point to that person, and then he would pose the question. So he would say, so Mary, what do you think about what Bob just said? And Mary would answer, and then he would turn to somebody else. So Stan, what do you think about what Mary just said? So her voice gets heard twice. And I know we hear about this often when we make suggestions to what men and what supporters of women can do. And I don't think we can say it enough times because it's still not happening. And it's a courtesy thing, really. I mean, we want to make sure that everybody's voice in the room gets heard. And especially now that you're on Zoom or Microsoft Teams calls all day long, you know that you have to make sure everybody gets to say what they came there to say and not just listen, because it gets tiring for people to not be heard, I think. So that's Connor to Al. I believe the bell curve is coming now. So why don't you change the slide, Kathy, please? Yeah, here it is. I don't know if you can see the bottom of this. I think so. It has the names on the bottom, but you could clearly see here that there's a lot less Marcs and Richards than there are Connors and Als in the interviews that I conducted. And the material for the book are these interviews. I then continuously talk to more men. And I also have an online survey where men can start to use to find out who they are. And the bell curve shows that it's a pretty accurate perception of the lay of the land. But obviously, if I were to do these interviews in a non-tech related space, I don't know what it would look like. Maybe it would be very different. Next slide, please. So the next one is Al to Memo. And here we have Al, who I said is a happy-go-lucky guy. He supports women on his team. He does he does speak up on behalf of women. But what are the, and like I said, here's a great opportunity. You know, maybe some of the men who are on this call are saying, you know, I would love to help. Well, you're here. That's a great first step. You're making yourself known as an ally by showing up for this call or taking in this information. That's a really great first step. When it comes to moving from Al to Memo, it's really taking, is there a question? Oh, okay.
When it comes about the tribute app, so I got it.
Okay.
It's fine, keep going.
Okay, so it comes down to building trust in a one-on-one relationship. And like I said, some men here will hesitate to take on that responsibility of approaching a woman and saying, how can I help? But that's really the best thing you can do. How can I help? If you're approached by a woman who says, hey, you know, I know you have a lot of expertise in, you know, selling in this geo or building channel programs or whatever it is, would you consider mentoring me? And the guy says, I'm not really sure. Well, let's see if we can actually get a formal mentorship program going, or if we can plug it into an existing program, just so we have a format to follow so that there's no questions about why we're spending so much time talking or visiting or whatever it is. In this particular case, this is a great mentorship story. So this man, it was actually not her coming to him. She was working for him. He identified her as having great potential, both with customers, internal inside the organization. She understood the business. She had learned, she had gotten to know tons and tons of people. But when it came to stepping into a meeting and delivering her pitch or sharing her ideas, she was a little bit hesitant, maybe even shy. For numerous reasons. And we've all the women here have been that woman once or twice in that meeting room where we're like, oh, I really don't know if I want to share here because there's a room that's filled with men. So he said to her, okay, I'll be your mentor. I am going to make a point of making you feel uncomfortable. And are you okay with that? Oh, yeah, maybe. So they would debate, they would discuss. He would put her in situations, and he said, this is completely safe space. I can't fire you. I'm not going to fire you, but I want you to be okay with being uncomfortable in a situation and learn how to get out of it by discussing your points in a different way, approaching it in a different way or whatnot. And that's obviously very high-end mentoring because they were also able to meet in an office environment and so on. But they went on to becoming good friends. This is many years ago that this mentorship started. She has gotten to know his wife, and it became a really tight partnership that really helped her to progress her career. And so mentorship, we can talk about all day long, but if you don't mentor a woman, regardless if you're a man or a woman on the call, or you should say, hey, how can I help you? Because I bet you anything that you have some experience that they don't have, and vice versa. Often in a mentoring situation, you will learn more from your mentee about yourself than you expected. Often when I've followed mentorships and I've talked to the mentors afterwards, they're like, it was so amazing. I learned so much from this young person. So the next slide, please. So now we're moving from the allies to the advocates. And we know that Memo is caring, but not always super confident. He supports women by being their mentor one-on-one. Samir is really the one who takes ownership of what he thinks he can develop. And in a man's world, this happens all the time. Guys stand behind each other, they sponsor each other, they lift each other up, they promote each other. And that's been going on forever. And women have a different system among themselves. But when it comes to men supporting women, it really needs to be made more official. Men have to sort of go in and say, hey, I'm going to work with you so that you can get promoted. These are the things that you might need in this type of organization, and so on. Now, for both mentors and sponsors, if any man ever thinks about speaking up on behalf of a woman, and it's a specific woman, they need to check with her first. Are you okay with me speaking on your behalf in a meeting that I'm having with these other people? Don't just go and do it. Always check with her. She might not want any help. She might not want your help. So just be aware of that. Now, this story here is a support story. It's a story of indirect support. So there's always, for all of these scenarios, there's indirect support and direct support. In this particular case, there was a man who went over to, he went to China. This is a few years ago, and he went with his supervisor or his manager. And they were sitting in a meeting, and it was very formal. It was a big deal, big customer, big opportunity, and everybody was on their best behavior. And they just had to leave this meeting with this deal closed. And things were moving along nicely. And all of a sudden, the customer, who's supposed to be signing the paper, says, well, it's a good thing these products aren't developed by women, because then they would break. And the person who I interviewed, the man, he just froze. He was like, I didn't know what to say. But his manager said, well, that's not how we like to think about it. We actually have women in all parts of our development and QA and support and so on. And if that doesn't suit you, you don't have to buy the product. There is somebody who's really speaking up on behalf of women. And you kind of have to be a Samir or at Samir's level to do that, because it does take some guts. I don't think it's, this should always be said. We should always do that, but not every person speaks up in that way when it comes to women or even other minorities. The next slide, please. So we're almost at the top now, and I was going to say we're almost at the top of the hour. Now we're getting into the people who are incredibly visible. So Samir to James, like I said, Samir is accountable. He supports women by sponsoring them. He does it one woman at a time. Maybe he's sponsoring multiple at the same time, but it's still one individual at a time. The biggest shift is when he actually takes charge of a team or an organization or a whole company, and he takes that one-to-one to one-to-many action. The culture change here is really important. I had one story in the book about a man who, they had a situation of a man inside the company was accused of something by a woman, and it went to legal action. In the end, he was cleared, but they both ended up leaving the company. And my friend who I interviewed, he said, well, I could have just brushed the whole thing under the rug and just continued with business as usual. But it really, really, he's the CEO of the company, and it really frustrated him and made him super sad. He's like, is this something that's going on inside the company, or was this a one-time occurrence? So he did hire outside help, a woman, an HR consultant who came in, and they did a full evaluation across the organization. and were able to say that this had been a one-time occurrence. But then he didn't stop at that. He actually went through a multiple week exercise where he had all employees write down what they thought the values of the company should be. And then they distilled it down. And at the end, they came out with the true values that they all were able to stand behind. And that is how he really maybe didn't change as much, but really promoted the culture that all the people inside the organization wanted to see. And you have to be a James to do that. You have to be confident. But like I said, here once again, this is heads down. He's doing it. He's going through the motions, and that's fantastic. But now, what does James, who we think is like, that's the super boss, that's the guy that we all want, how does he actually grow even more? Next slide, please. So James to Marc, this is now graduation time, right? How do we move up to the absolute next level? And I often share a story of how I'm having lunch with a man who's definitely a James. All check boxes ticked off. And he said, well, what else can I do? And I said, well, how many people know that you've built a team of 50 employees and that you're this successful and that you're exceeding, your numbers continuously quarter after quarter, and that you're having all these successes outside of the country and so on? And he said, well, not that many. And I said, well, start speaking about it. That is how you graduate from a James to a Marc. And also, there is this other story, which can fall into James or Marc, but let's stick with Marc. This guy that I was talking to, he had sent out, or they had published a job ad, and they wanted to get more tech resources into the company. And they could not get a single woman or a single woman at all to apply for the job. They were also looking for minorities because they really wanted to mix things up as much as possible, and they couldn't find any. All that was applying was white men. And so he thought, okay, I can change the recruiting agency, or I can really try to figure out what's wrong here. So he started to, he went back to the recruiting agency and he said, can you do something that's different? Can you do some market research? I want you to go back and call every single prospect that you would normally call and ask them what's wrong with this picture. And the feedback that they got was completely invaluable. The benefits were not listed on the website. The website was mostly pictures of young white guys. And the list went on and on. And once they had evaluated and looked at what all the problems were, also together with an outside consultant, they were able to change the image of the business to the outside world, and were able to attract a more diverse workforce. So I think we've reached the end. I spoke so fast because we started late, and it's all my technical inability. But if you go to the next slide, Kathy, I think we have just my email address there, and we have our characters. And so what I want to say now is, first, thank you for listening. If you have a story to share, if you're a man and you want to talk to me, or you want to write to me and tell me what you've done to support a woman at one point or another, I welcome all of those stories. I love to hear them. And if I share anything, I will ask for your permission before I do that, with or without your name. I will be starting to offer coaching to men who are interested in learning what they can do. We can talk about, it's sort of like mentorship, really, more so than coaching. Saying, I have this issue or that issue at work, or I want to know how to support a woman on my team better. I'd be happy to discuss those things. Anybody who wants to use this material, just let me know, just email me. And then I will let you know when the book becomes available. In this presentation, there is actually a link to the book, but I'll send it out to Kathy once it becomes available, hopefully in a few months. And then she can share it with this community. So that's it. Thank you very much. We have 5 minutes for questions, if there are any questions, Kathy.
Wow, this is amazing. I know we talked about this back actually maybe a year ago. It's been a while, but I had just never really thought about that distinction between advocates and allies. And it makes perfect sense when you say it, but I just never had really seen it. And I loved how you divided things up there. So yeah, we have a few minutes for questions. Does anyone want to type anything in the chat window or come off mute?
Putting everybody on the spot. So
would love to get hold of your book and promote where necessary. Yeah, so definitely when it comes out, Eva will let me know, and I will retweet it through the whole Women of IT Pros. But you can also follow her. I think we had her. Well, I know I definitely had her handle in all of the tweets and LinkedIn that I was doing.
Mm. It's interesting. This is a lot of this stuff we've heard before. A lot of the things are new. And I find often that when I kind of dump this amount of information the first time, that it's, it needs a little while to settle.
Yeah.
But like I said, but like I said, I'm always available. I have plenty of time, both for phone calls and to email with people. And a lot of the stories that were shared to me in these interviews are incredibly personal. I was able to use almost everybody's real name in the book. Wow. But some people said, no, please don't use my name. And the men who are disclosing these stories, they, like I said, very many of you are not even aware of how much you're already helping. And I just want more people to hear about the things that are already going on out there that are good, because I think we can build more goodness upon that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did have a couple of questions. So Eric says, from the bell curve, there were very few Richards. I'm curious, where should we be trying to get?
Where should we be trying to get?
In the bell, like, the Richards, like what should the curve?
Oh, okay.
It's not realistic to have everyone at the top levels, and hopefully not necessary.
I don't think so. I don't, I think that there will always be Richards. And frankly, from the beginning, I was thinking I'm not even going to include him, but he's really the foundation for how you get to Connor. And the idea is really that if more Richards could move to Connor, and more Connors could move to Al, and more Als to Memo, and so on, then everything would shift. Obviously, as new people enter the workforce, will, depending on what their background is, they will always end up in different places. I just don't want anybody who identifies as a Richard or Connor or even Al to think that they need to become Marc or James. Absolutely not. Maybe you aspire to just support one woman on your team by saying, hey, how's it going today? How are you feeling? What was your weekend like? So we want to be very cautious with not expecting that everybody can or even wants to go, climb higher than one level.
Yeah. And then we just had one more. We have time to get in here. What would you do if someone thinks they're an advocate, but maybe they are really a chauvinist?
Happens all the time. It happens all the time. So it's a question of very often somebody who thinks that they're an advocate, they have the opinion that women need to be like men. They have to be aggressive or assertive in a specific way so that they can easily relate to them. I think there you have to be, like everything else, you have to be super specific. You have to ask, well, how did you help? And if somebody says, well, I'm definitely an advocate of women, I'm telling you, she just had a baby. She doesn't want to get on the road. And then you have to respond, well, that is not my experience. So you always say, in my experience, I haven't seen that. As a matter of fact, she's really happy to get a full night's sleep or whatever it is. So very often the approach to the guy who thinks he's higher up and he's actually further down is saying, in my experience. And that's where we need the men to say, in my experience, because we as women, we can also say that, but it kind of weighs a little bit more if a man says it to another man.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you so much. Let's see, we're gonna have to wrap up here. So let me just throw a couple things in the chat window, and we can still stick around for a few minutes after the call, but I do try to keep it, because I know people have to take off here. So if you're a Microsoft person, I'll give you a link there, but also if you are external to Microsoft, you can find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Eventbrite. And there is a survey, so we would love for you to take a minute to fill out the survey there. Just go to bit.ly/WITPRO/OG survey and let us know what you think. Do you want more calls like this, different kinds of calls? But Eva Helen, thank you so much. This was really educational. I can't wait for your book to come out, and we will definitely make sure everyone knows when it's available.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you, everybody.